was at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. This is now 2009. I'm there trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. And a buddy of mine saw an attractive woman and asked me to be his wingman and introduce them. And he offered to pay for all my drinks the whole weekend. And I figured, why not? Right. Like at the very least, we'd have a funny story to tell the next day, but it actually worked. I went over there, I opened up a conversation, and then I introduced them and went away. And they ended up going on a lunch date the next day. And he said, thanks for being my wingman. And I thought to myself, wow, if that's all it takes to help someone out, maybe there's a need for people to want to have the confidence to do it themselves. And I just took my experience that I created for myself and the success that I had and just parlayed that into something that I could offer other people.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who's out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Thomas Edwards, and he is known as the professional wingman. What does that mean? Well, we're going to find out today. He is a coach committed to helping high-achieving entrepreneurs and professional men and women live iconic lives. We talk about how he got started, basically helping men in relationships and meeting partners. And then he has expanded his business into helping people with their businesses, their health, their spiritual growth, and living fulfilling lives filled with joy. Thomas is going to tell us how he got started doing this. Basically, when he was bullied for being an academic, nerdish kind of a guy. And yet there was a part of him, a resilient part, that had an intuition about how to communicate with people and connect with people. And he spent the last 15 years helping people to do the very thing that he had to teach himself. So let's get started. Here he is. This is Thomas Edwards. Thomas Edwards is here. He's in Asheville, North Carolina. And I'm so happy to finally meet you, Zoom-wise. But apparently, we were talking before that we started recording, we intersected in the past and don't remember each other. So, boy, the impression we made on each other.
Right. Just two inconspicuous ships passing in the sea in broad daylight.
Apparently, yes. And we have mutual friends that, we both know very well. And yet, yeah. Who knows? But now we're going to be friends here today.
That's right.
So Thomas, you call yourself a professional wingman for life. Yeah. And I love people think a wingman, they think, oh, it's a person that helps a guy pick up chicks, but that's not what you do. You help people. It's kind of like a life coaching thing. Well, yeah, of course. I mean,
that's how it started.
Well, it always starts, that's the prime motivator, certainly in your 20s.
Yeah.
It's, you can't sit still. We all know that. But
that's right.
We're a little bit past we're a little past our 20s. So, but then you became inspired to help people doing, and I said, what have you been doing today? And he goes, oh, helping people with, and then you rattled off this list of things that were just basically, life situations, businesses, personal growth, health, dieting, all kinds of things. What happened? How did this happen for you that you became this professional guy that has been very successful at helping clients?
First of all, I'm so grateful to be here with you, Bob. So thank you. Thank you first and foremost. And, I always knew, even when I started the professional wingman, that I wanted to impact a lot of people. And right in front of me was the opportunity to help people overcome one of their greatest fears, which is being alone. And for a lot of men, they struggled in today's technologically advanced world with being able to connect with people face to face. And so the opportunity was there and I jumped right on it to just help people feel more confident in themselves. So that way, when they actually see someone that they're interested in, they can go over there and not only initiate conversation, but have it go in a direction that could lead to another conversation and another one till eventually they can meet their person and have kids and live happily ever after. And I mean, I'm still really good at it, but when I have about 400 marriages and engagements under my belt over the 13, 14 plus years I've been doing it. But in that process, what I saw with these clients, and I started also work with women as well, is roughly 65% men, 35% women. But what I saw with the guys was it wasn't just about finding love and being in a relationship. It was about being confident in who they are and being able to show up that way in the world. And the conversations that we would have, even in the middle of a bar or an event where it's a social event or a networking event, it wasn't about, oh my gosh, she's so hot. Like, I can't talk to her. I'm so afraid. It was, what about me doesn't feel worthy to be able to approach someone that I'm interested in and engage them in a conversation? And what makes me not feel worthy enough to feel like they would be receptive to that? And so when I saw that the opportunity was for deeper work, that's what triggered in me. It was like, that's the stuff that I want to focus on. And so after going through my own dark night of the soul, which I'm happy to talk about, if you want, I realized that I needed to push myself to work with more people and show them that confidence and knowing yourself and believing in yourself can help you overcome whatever obstacle you have in your life. And I focused on relationships, then I focused on health, and then I focused on entrepreneurs who just wanted to level up in their lives. It's not so much in their business, but how they show up in their business. How do they show up in their lives? How do they balance the responsibilities that they have in their lives and find fulfillment and joy and peace and all of that? That for me was what I knew I wanted my legacy. I felt like my legacy was meant to be like that. I felt like God put me in here to help the future leaders of this world live that iconic life. And so that's why I'm where I'm at today. And it's awesome. It's so cool to see what, these guys and these gals I'm working with are doing. It's nothing short of amazing.
I have so many questions about this. The first one is there's a lot of obviously uh, a gift that you have to read people and to be compassionate. I think that's probably an innate gift, and there's some intuition there. Was there any type of training that you took? And I'm not huge on schools and things like that. I don't find those to be they're limiting.
Mm-hmm.
You can learn a lot in classes and stuff, but they are limiting. They're so what was the sort of the path to um, doing like the first few people? Was it just like, hey, Larry, I can help you to stop thinking you're a douchebag and be okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
I guess the steps leading up to that, we can go back to even high school. I wasn't this lovable guy. In fact, I was the opposite. I was the guy that was being made fun of. I wasn't popular. I was considered a geek or just someone who just wasn't with the cool people, but I knew how to listen. And even if there were girls who I kind of liked but just wanted to support them, I would sit with them and I would listen to what they got going on, and they always appreciated that I was able to hold space for them. And every once in a while I would give them advice and they would go out and they would do it. And I never really thought much of that growing up, because I was just so obsessed with wanting to be liked and women.
Sure.
um, but when I graduated from college and I went back to Boston, which is where I grew up, I saw myself with an opportunity to reinvent myself and start to create a career for myself. And I knew that I wanted to eventually maybe start my own business, but I didn't know how to actually do that. So I blogged about my journey of how to build a life. How do you build a lifestyle where you can work hard, but be able to go out and enjoy and have a good social network of people and parlay that into more opportunities and maybe eventually, meet women. And I documented the whole thing. This was back in 2009, late 2008, early 2009. And people started to ask me for advice. And I didn't put myself on a pedestal and say to myself, well, I'm the expert here and this is what you should do. It was more of, this is what I did in my experience. Maybe if I were in your shoes, this is what I would consider. And they would just run with it. And lo and behold, they come back and say, Thomas, it worked like a charm. Thanks so much. I feel like I should be paying you. And that's when it started to kind of simmer. The light bulb was flickering. And then it wasn't until I was at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. This is now 2009. I'm there trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. And a buddy of mine saw an attractive woman and asked me to be his wingman and introduce them. And he offered to pay for all my drinks the whole weekend. And I figured, why not? Right. Like at the very least, we'd have a funny story to tell the next day, but it actually worked. I went over there, I opened up a conversation, and then I introduced them and went away. And they ended up going on a lunch date the next day. And he said, thanks for being my wingman. And I thought to myself, wow, if that's all it takes to help someone out, maybe there's a need for people to want to have the confidence to do it themselves. And I just took my experience that I created for myself and the success that I had and just parlayed that into something that I could offer other people. And it just ended up working.
So I'm assuming you didn't know the woman either. You didn't run up and introduce yourself.
No, this was not a rigged situation. I mean, she was visiting from out of town, just like I was, and that was kind of the jumping point of our interaction. She was actually from Kentucky, and I had never been, and so she was just telling me all the things about what life in Kentucky was like, and it just created an opening where I was able to introduce my friend who was kind of waiting at the side, and then I just went to the bathroom and never came back. So, so it kind of just worked out that he was able to take over from there.
And what was his hesitancy? He didn't want to blow it by saying the wrong thing, or he just thought he wasn't physically attractive, or she was too something for him, or not. He was what was the thing that stopped him? Because once he got there, he was okay. Sounds
Well,
like.
it's interesting, right? Like when we are kind of alone with ourselves, with our thoughts and feelings, right? We don't typically say great things about ourselves. We just don't, And in the case for a lot of guys, when they see attractive, women, or if they're in a social situation, the number one thing I think people, not just men, but I think people in general are just afraid of is not being accepted. They don't want to feel rejected. They don't want to experience it, especially in a public forum. It feels like just the epitome of low self-worth to them. And the fear of that holds everyone, I think it holds anyone back from making that move that they strongly desire. So your body is a great instrument to let you know about the things that you should and should not do. And so I always tell my guys, if you're around as someone who's attractive, or even just someone who's influential, it doesn't have to be necessarily a woman. It doesn't have to be sexual. It could be a celebrity. It could be someone who's politically in office, or someone who has influence. You feel it. If your body's reacting in a certain way, it's not actually telling you to run. It's just gearing you up because there's something about that person that makes you feel drawn and connected to, but it's up to you to take the first step to find out what that thing is. But more often than not, people equate that feeling to anxiety, to being uncomfortable, which it's an uncomfortable feeling, but usually it points to I shouldn't do it, or I'm not supposed to do it, as if we shouldn't feel anything when we see an attractive person, and that's just not true. Like, imagine if, let's say, you find someone who's not as attractive. You're probably not going to feel the way you do if you saw her in comparison to an attractive person, right? So your body is actually a really good instrument to let you know what you're into and what you're interested in. But it's the mind that will trick us into believing that that's not the case and talk us out of most of the opportunities that are available to us. So as a wingman, I get to intervene and say, hey, don't listen to here. Trust your gut and use it as an opportunity to practice so you can get better the next time it happens.
What's interesting about rejection is it feels like death. That's why it's so unpleasant. You feel like you're just going to die. I mean, I don't feel that way now, but I did feel that way as a young man, certainly in the romantic situation. If I got rejected, even just, hey, how you doing? And it's like, not interested. It's like, oh, I'm a piece of shit. I'm homely. So she's too good for me. You put it all on yourself, that the rejection must be based on something is wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
rather than it just didn't work for whatever energetic reason. Maybe it's the other person who feels that they're not worth anything, so they reject you first. You don't really know.
You
You
don't.
don't really know. You don't know anything. The idea of what is rejection, what really happens when that's perceived, and am I still okay if that does happen, and what can I do to not take it so personally?
And that's tough. Think about it, way back in the day, rejection meant you're ostracized from society and you probably were going to die alone. Our minds are not too advanced from that time. So those feelings of fear that's developed in the mind go back to that. And then it becomes a survival thing. So the fear feels like death because it is, right? Our minds are pre-wired to think that rejection is death. So of course you're going to feel it. But to your point, I think the opportunity to push yourself through and know that you're going to come out okay, it tells you two things. One, rejection isn't really rejection. I like to call it denial. Sometimes you're just denied access, and that's okay. But the most important thing is we don't turn that into blame, right? Sometimes it's not our fault, but it certainly is our responsibility to learn from the experience and make a commitment to show up better, right? And so even if maybe you didn't know what to say after you initiated a conversation, this is something that's really common with guys. You know, they say hi or they say something and they don't really know where the conversation's to go from there, and they lose their opportunity, right? The window closes and it's done. I find more guys being hard on themselves about the fact that they couldn't come up with something than anything else. And I take a moment and say, hey, guy, like, let's spotlight the fact that you were able to open up a conversation and she smiled and she was receptive to you. We'll get to the part where you can continue conversation from there, but let's highlight the fact that you were able to do this. It was only an hour ago that you were drooling over this woman. And all of a sudden now you went over and you just opened up conversation and she smiled. She was receptive. She didn't reject you. It just ran out of momentum. We can
Mm-hmm.
build on that, and it's not tied to your self-worth. It's tied to your experience. It's your worth and your experience. They're mutually exclusive. You're a great guy. You're a catch. We can work on that, right? But experience, if we can build your experience, it's going to build your confidence and it's going to allow you to know what to do moving forward. And I think that's one of the biggest things that guys lack. Guys lack emotional experience. They don't allow themselves to be in their emotions, not um, from a weak point of view, but from an awareness point of view. Like, how aware of you of what goes on in your body or in your emotional state when you're in these environments? And what tools or processes do you use to navigate those environments? Most guys don't have that type of experience. And that's why it backfires or it holds them back, not just in social romantic conversations, but in other realms as well.
No, I think we were in more, when we were in smaller communities, even go back even further to tribes, and then you grew up with people of your age. The kids hung out together and grew up together, so it wasn't this big effort to come out of nowhere and have a conversation. It was just, I grew up with him or her, and now I know who they are, and now we're talking, and now it turns into something else but it's fluid that way. But when you have a society like ours, which is so vast, people are so separated,
Mm-hmm.
that and there's suspicion. There is suspicion. People are suspicious. I would think most women would be suspicious of the guy that approaches them, which may be perceived as aggression. And this isn't the kind of guy I want, as opposed to somebody who's genuinely, a nice guy, wants to have a conversation. How do they tell the difference? Because it's vulnerable being the person who's being approached just as much as it is to approach somebody. And I'm talking about business too. That can be
Yeah.
business. That can be in anything where, like, what does this person want? I need to be careful. So there is a certain amount of, you have to sort of crack the paranoid part of people. It's not even paranoid. It's caution. It's caution, because I'm cautious. Somebody approaches me, I'm reading them. I'm going to read them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to assume they are, of ill intent, but I am definitely, there's that nonverbal communication and the verbal. So you have both.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are two. I mean, you brought up two really important things. First is immersion. We don't have enough experiences anymore that have that type of social immersion, right? I think the last thing that we have is school, right? And that's pretty much it. But back in the day, even as early as like as late as the 80s. I mean, a lot of neighborhoods were immersive. I mean, you were playing with your buddies on your block and just hanging out and doing all kinds of fun stuff. And there was a cute girl down the street, and over time you guys would see each other, and maybe something could come up from that. I mean, it's not that long ago. It feels like forever ago, but you're right. The lack of immersive environments that can allow us to build relationships more naturally, they're just fewer and farther in between. But it doesn't mean that they're not accessible. It's just that we need to be more intentional around and making the commitment to immerse ourselves in various communities, groups, organizations, clubs, that can create that effect. And then I think the other thing, I lost my train of thought there, but it's more about what was that second thing that you said?
Well, I was talking about people being suspect of each other and wary and nonverbal cues and all kinds of stuff that, based on maybe past experience too, you don't really know.
Absolutely, and that comes with experience. So even if we look at it from a numbers perspective, I like to use this example all the time because it just really shows everyone can understand numbers to a certain extent, right? And so if you're a person of influence or an attractive woman, you're going to be approached more often than someone who doesn't have influence or isn't as attractive. Conservatively, let's say it's 10-1, and let's start from the age of 18. So this person, let's say it's an attractive woman, she goes to college, she goes out 2 nights a week. And between the hours of 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., she's approached by 5 guys each night, right? So 10 a week. So over time, that's 520 men that she's been approached by a year. By the time she's 28, that's 5,200. By the time she's 38, that's 10,400, right? She hasn't done anything other than show up. And 10,000 men have talked to her over these 20 years. And that's just between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., right? Hypothetically. I'm sure this woman is going out during the week and she's also being approached then. Now let's do the other side. Let's say you're a guy who is of average, who's just average. Maybe you'll approach one woman a weekend. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and that's 52 a year. That's 520 over the course of 10 years. And once you get to that point, it's I mean, in my experience working with thousands of guys, most guys have not approached that amount of people, the amount of women. They just haven't. So the experience gap is so wide. And what ends up happening is attractive women and people of influence, because they've been approached so much, have a natural filter, right? Their discernment level is so great because they can assess, they've had the experience to assess body language, like you said, and to assess tonality and what to expect in certain environments. Whereas for other people, they don't. They don't have that experience, and so there's a huge gap, which is why I like experience. When they talk about dating being a numbers game, I disagree from the sense of like, if you date enough people, you'll find your one. I think it's partially true, but I think the numbers game is really just about the experience. How many reps are you willing to take to get to a point where you're at a level of confidence that could probably allow you to shoot above your weight class, because that's ultimately what the goal ends up becoming for a lot of guys. And they'll tell you, I definitely married up as opposed to marrying my equal, so to speak. And they just mean that in a very humble way. But it's due to the experience and the confidence that they were able to build that allowed them to take that shot when before they probably wouldn't have.
So you really get to hear the innermost insecurities of people when they talk to you, and and I find that when you talk about that stuff with somebody else, it diminishes its power. That when you say, "Oh, I don't think I'm," let's say, I don't think I'm cool enough to be in that group of people or to be with her, and then I say it, and it sounds really stupid. To me, it sounds stupid. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
um, um, so what it always came down to for me, and this is true of anything, if I like who I am, it doesn't really matter what else happens, where I go, and how I'm perceived. It doesn't, ultimately, it doesn't really matter, because if I like what I'm doing and who I am, then maybe that isn't the right situation for me. So I don't try to bend to um, fit in to things that where I don't fit. It's that's a worse feeling to me, is compromising your true nature to fit in somewhere that doesn't feel right. That's worse than actually being rejected for who you are. That to me is worse.
It's like you're choosing to be less of yourself in hopes of being accepted. But let's play that tape. What if you are accepted? Now you're living in a lie that's built on you being less than yourself, right? So something's got to give. You either can't take it anymore and you explode, right? Internally and eventually externally, or you get found out. One or the other is going to happen, And so I love that point that you bring up, because, there's two things I believe in. One is to be your own best company. If you can enjoy life doing the things that you love and you invite people into it, what a beautiful life you get to live. It becomes independent of belonging anywhere or having a particular attachment to anyone. And so when people come into your life, it just adds so much richness and a feeling of it being a bonus to your life. But I think a core value that I live by is this idea called authentic polarization, where you live so true to who you are and what you represent that by default, it creates a polarizing effect where there are people who just, like, uh, Bob's not about I'm not about that Bob life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not for me. He does his own thing. We probably wouldn't be friends. And there's other people who are like, oh my gosh, I want to be Bob's best friend. I want to be in Bob's life. I want to spend all the time. I want to get to know him. I want to connect with him. He and I share similar values, and all of a sudden now you become surrounded by people who borderline are obsessed with you, but in a healthy, connected way. And I think there's something beautiful about being able to be that person when you're trying to attract things into your life, whether it's people, business, opportunities, a healthier lifestyle, more joy in your life. You have to be really decisive about that. It's not living in the gray. You have to be either I'm committed to this or I'm not, or I live by this value or I don't. And I think in a world where, polarity is actually on the forefront, it's a trending thing. I think it's important as us as individuals to live that way, not in a harmful way, but in a freeing way. So that way, the people who are in your life, they're there because they fully support and are connected with what, your values and what you stand for. And those who don't, they're not even in your periphery.
There's a freedom to that. You don't have to think about all these other pieces of the puzzle that you've got to keep in line so you can maintain. You don't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it means you're walking alone. And that doesn't mean you're lonely, though. It just means sometimes you're just like, there's nothing here that works for me at all. I'll just wait till something does work for me, and that's what I'm going to do. And then it's sort of, as life goes on, you kind of build that world for yourself. But you don't come in being handed that. That's for sure. I mean, they don't really tell you that, and whoever they are. I mean, your parents don't really say that. The schools don't say that. It's like, this is what you do to get from point A to point B to point C. And those skills, these very simple, elusive skills, aren't really discussed much. I'll just give you a simple example. When my kids were little, 2, 3, 4, 5, I mean, little kids, my wife and I taught them. We gave them a class in how to shake somebody's hand and look them in the eye. We
Mm.
taught them how to do it. This is how you shake somebody's hand. This is the firmness level. This is how you make eye contact. This is what you say. That has gone so well for them in life. They are so good at that. I mean, they have other issues, of course, because they're humans,
But
but
that one thing.
but that was just the beginning of here is a way to take responsibility for yourself
Yeah.
and to connect with people. And it doesn't matter what happens after that. You've done your part. You've showed up as, what does a firm handshake do? It says, I'm confident with who I am. I'm giving you part of me because I'm shaking your hand. I'm making eye contact. So I'm really connecting there. I'm also, you can read me and I can read you. You've probably had a handshake with somebody and it's just like a dead fish and they're looking down. You go, ugh, get away from me.
Feel it. After a while, you get to the point where you even feel the energy before the handshake. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
ever had that experience, but it just doesn't feel good, And I've learned in time, if you stick around low vibe, you're gonna get there. You're just gonna get there, And so that handshake is a powerful impression that you can make anywhere you go. Right?
Yeah.
Same as remembering someone's name. Those two things. If you were able to kind of figure that out, you can get pretty far in life. Honestly, people may laugh at that now, but it can be that simple. Just by being able to shake someone's hand, look at them in the eye, and just remember them, but not only remember their name, but to call them by their name.
Yeah. And also to remember something that they told you, that you talked about. That tells the other person, I actually was really listening to you. And that actually interests me. That's like genuine in my part. I find when people tell me things about themselves that interest me, I remember it because I find that to be like, oh, now you're telling me who you are, what you do, and which is also part of who you might be. And so that stuff, those little things. Oh yeah, we talked about this. That's basically the biggest part of my memory is what we talked about that interested me that I've remembered more so than their name. And I'm not great with names. I screw those up all the time. But you know what I do? I tell people I'm terrible with names. I don't hide it and I don't pretend.
There you
I
go.
just go, I know you. I know that we talked about this. You're from this place. And I cannot remember your name.
That level of honesty would probably show up better and impress someone more than you trying to fake it.
I remember your name though.
Well, that worked out. But we also had a great conversation.
You didn't take any sort of courses or anything like that. This is all, you're a self-taught person, as if there's any other kind of way to learn. There really isn't. It's all, we all teach ourselves. I'm sure there were some influential people or books or things that workshops. I don't know what you've done because you seem to really, have a deep understanding of this stuff.
I love learning and I love people. I love understanding how things work right down to just the minutia. That's always just fascinated me. I ignored it for a long period of time just because the trauma I experienced being teased and bullied, being an academic. But now I embrace it. But in terms of like influences, I remember when I was in college, I had my first big heartbreak and I wanted to go and I decided to reinvent myself at that point. And I picked up a book and the first book was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. Great book. Taught me so much at 19 years old about how to properly communicate. I didn't expect it to teach me that, but it was my first big takeaway from that type of book. And I started to read other books, especially around the idea of communicating with a win-win philosophy. I don't feel like it's necessary for people to lose. I don't think there's compromise if both parties are winning. And I think it's just a perception and our own evaluation of these things that can influence our ability to create those situations. But I love reading. I mean, right now I'm reading again, listening to The Wealth Money Can't Buy by Robin Sharma. I mean, I read audio or listen to audiobooks all the time, and I read books from time to time. But in terms of influences, I look everywhere, man. Marcus Aurelius around Stoicism. I love the WWE. The Rock, Stone Cold, those characters, and how they were able to brand themselves and the storylines that allowed to create their coming of age. Like I love stories, biographies, or even if it's fictional, stories that talk about coming of age because it's that journey that I love. I love seeing what people do in the face of struggle when they're committed to their journey, or those moments where they have to dig deep and what do they discover when they go down there? Because I personally have had my struggles. I didn't have the tools that I have now to get me out of what the darkness that I personally was in. And thank God I got to a place where I realized that I needed to get support. And after that, things started to get better. But my influence comes from everywhere. If you have an inspiring message and there's a story behind it where you have gone from point A, which sucked, to point B, which was amazing, I want to know what happened in between, because that's where I get to learn how I get to go through life and overcome the obstacles that are in my way.
Do you have people coming to you that are starting like so far back from, baseline? Let's just say there's a baseline for something. I mean, just people that are so damaged that it's almost like I don't even know if I can help this person. Have you had some people like that, or are you basically intersecting with people who already have started to work on themselves?
Great question. I can help anyone, but I know I'm not for everyone. And what that means is if you are coachable, if you have a willingness to be open to ideas, directions, a different way of looking at things, then you have an opportunity to experience transformation inside of coaching. And it doesn't matter where you're coming from, how high or how low, how low you're coming from. I mean, I had a guy who was married for 35 years, lost his wife, became a widow, felt like she was kind of in charge of everything, so to speak. And he was starting from zero in his late 60s. What do you do? Right. And so for him, it was like a second life for him. And the beauty about, having us starting looking at it that way, he also had 60 plus years of experience start that foundation again. And that was just enough hope for him to believe that there was a life after losing his wife. So I've had those situations. I've had guys who had successful companies, either got outed or lost, all their money, had to start back from zero, not just in their business, but just in their lives. When you lose a lot, you really do lose a lot. And it's not just in the thing that you think matters, whether it's business or money. Like you can become emotionally bankrupt. You can become spiritually bankrupt, right? You can become physically, not financially, physically bankrupt because your body is just dying. You're just not caring for it. And just the mental stress is literally killing you by the second. And so how do you start from scratch? I've had plenty of people who have come to me wanting to reinvent themselves. I think reinvention is ultimately just a reorientation on the path that you're meant to take, yeah. And it's just rediscovering that.
Sometimes you hear people say, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am anymore. It's an interesting question, but the answer to me is another question, which is, well, who do you want to be? Because that can happen, aside from the fact that if you're 5'2", you're not going to be 6'5". That's just not going to happen. I want to be a professional basketball player, but I'm 5'2". No, that's not going to happen. But who do you want to be as a person? What would be great? I had a teacher in high school. I just loved this guy. And he had us basically do a meditation. And he said, I want you to just I'm going to put on some music and I want you to think about what you want your life to be like. The one time in all the years I went to school that somebody actually did this, something where that was had some depth to it. It was unbelievable that he did that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people even knew what to do with that. To just sit in a room with your contemporaries and they're teenagers and your eyes are closed and you're thinking about what do I want my life to be like. I haven't even really started it in terms of being on my own yet, but I thought that was really a powerful thing that he suggested to people that they could manufacture anything that they really wanted to do, especially at 17. I mean, it's wide open, wide open. You could go any direction you want. Good for him. What a great guy.
That is awesome. I'm a big believer in dreaming and putting it to action. As much as I love to learn and read and digest content, like if I'm not implementing it, I'm just I'm just dreaming. So I think like, thinking without action is dreaming. And it's okay to dream. But at some point we need to bring that dream into reality, and we do that by taking action. But I do believe that we don't spend enough time in that dream space and allowing our creativity and our essence to create the most ideal experience that's possible. Like, we forget that thought is energy. Thought is something that can turn into manifestation if we allow ourselves to really be with that. The idea that you and I are here having a Zoom conversation, it originated from a thought. And there's powerful energy from those type of thoughts. People have some amazing thoughts. We just haven't seen 99% of them come to reality. Right? I think 1% of the thoughts that have changed the world are the ones that we get to experience these days. But there are 99% of those thoughts that are still just dreams, not fulfilled. And I think if we spend more time, not just being within the dream, I think being in the dream is important for connecting to that and having the emotions, but then bringing that into reality and taking action on them, man, the forces of nature that will support you in bringing that to life, you will be surprised how quickly and how strong they come.
I had a guy on this show, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, and his whole thing is very similar to what you're talking about, but the phrase he used was taking radical responsibility. I thought that was a great way to approach accomplishing anything you want in your life. To just say, well, here's my dream, but then the specifics, how do I get there? And what do I need to do? Who do I need to ask for help? That's something you mentioned earlier, which is a very hard thing to do.
Very
to
hard.
To let your ego step aside and go, I don't know. I don't know how to do this. Who do I talk to? Can I ask for help?
Especially when you're supposed to be the guy with all the answers.
Well, it's yeah, and I'll be straight with you. I used to see asking for help as weakness.
Same here.
Right? It's like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? Well, not only is it weakness because I can't do it yet, but it also opens you up for the thing we started talking about at the beginning, which is rejection. I'm not helping you.
Yeah.
Why would I help you? Because but the thing, then I think about when people ask me for help, it's a compliment. I like it. I want to help them. It's like, yeah, sure. I mean, unless they're complete, ridiculous or something, that's unreasonable. But for 99% of the time, somebody goes, oh, I don't know how to do this. Oh, let me show you. I know how to do that.
Yeah. We're blessed. And it's interesting. I've learned this with, high performers, influencers, mentors. They want to help. They want to help. If they have
for the most
time,
part, yes,
they will help you because it's a gift that they get to pass along. That's their philanthropy in so many ways. But I'm with you, man. I was raised to believe that I didn't need help, that it was my responsibility to figure it out on my own.
A man pulls himself up by his own bootstraps. Who came up with that one?
No idea, right?
But I don't even have bootstraps.
It's embedded programming. Right? I didn't wear boots for a long time. And I was like, bootstrap, like, and I really lived by that until I couldn't anymore, until I hit a wall. I'll call it a pit of my own doing that I was digging. And I'm there with the shovel still digging, thinking I'm going to get out of it, and realizing the tools that I have, as amazing as they were not going to be the tools that were going to get me out of this pit that I dug myself in. And when I realized I'm at my wit's end and I needed to ask for help, my instinct was to not. My
Yeah.
instinct was to, maybe if I try harder, maybe if I dig more, I'll find a way out. But I was just digging more and more deeper. And the feeling of someone saying, I can help you, that for me was one of those first feelings where I felt like maybe I'm not alone in this world. And this was before I realized I was never alone, because I have a higher power who I call God, that's always with me, always has been with me, even if I didn't recognize that. But having that person say, I can help you, or I want to help you, made me feel like I didn't have to walk this road alone. And now, many years later, my philosophy is, if I'm not with other people, I'm not nearly as strong as I could be. I can't have nearly as much impact as I feel I'm meant to, unless, by myself. I can't do this alone. So
Collaboration is so much fun anyway. It's just,
yeah,
it's 1 + 1 is 3. When you do that, it's just the best.
it's the
Let's talk
best.
about the concept, because it's just a concept of failure.
Mm.
Okay, I decide I want to do something, I implement, the necessary tools, I get the help, and it doesn't work out the way I had hoped. Have I failed? Have I failed? And what does that mean? Does it mean, I see, I think it's kind of a good thing for the most part, that it's a learning experience. It's not really a failure. And when I usually sort of equate it to learning an instrument.
Mm.
I can play. Let's say I play the guitar and I'm okay, and I'm like not very good. I'm okay. So I get some help. I take some take some lessons. I have somebody show me stuff. I can do stuff, and then I'm just not good enough to be a professional. Well, I still enjoy it. I get better. Have I failed? I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe there's 2 years where I'm just not making any progress at all. Then all of a sudden, I haven't given up and I have a breakthrough, and now I'm playing beyond what I thought would be a successful guitar. So I use that because it's a very disciplined thing, but it also has a lot of intuition in it too. I use that music as an analogy for that stuff. So where am I failed as a guitar player ever? Not really ever.
You still play?
Oh, I'm not even a guitar player. I just picked that up as a thing. No, I play a little bit. I'm not. No, that's not my instrument. I play around with it, but that's not my instrument. So it's one of those things where if you play an instrument, do you play something?
I don't. I wish
Okay.
I did.
So if you play an instrument, and you're serious about playing an instrument, it's like a marriage. It really is a committed relationship that has all the joy and pain of being intimate. It's just you and the instrument, but it can be gut wrenching and it can be beautiful. It can be great. But I picked up the guitar as a side thing, and I told myself, you're not going to care about this the way you cared about the other instrument
Mm.
because you can't take the pain. It's like I don't need two wives. One is plenty.
Well, that's a great analogy. Not the wise, but the
Yeah,
second the
no, I know
second
what you're
the
saying.
second instrument, right? Like, the intention that you went in with was very clear. I'm not choosing to go anywhere with this other than to be right here and play.
Yeah, have as much fun as possible with my limitations.
Exactly. Exactly. And there's nothing wrong. There's no even opportunity to fail, because there's no framework where there's a beginning or an end. Right? There's no path that has been charted out. It's just an experience that you're choosing to have and be present with. And to your point, I think failure only exists if you quit.
If you quit, yeah.
That's
You
it,
you
right?
det-
Like,
you actually you determine for yourself whether you've failed.
yeah. Because as
I'm
long
sure
as
now
you as
go
long
ahead.
as you keep going, then you're just getting feedback on how to be better. Right? I think that's ultimately what it is. And people will fail in their lives because they might give up. If you're 5'2" and you're trying to go to the NBA, you have a 0.001% chance of making it. It's not like it hasn't happened. Spud Webb, Isaiah Thomas, some notable, sub 5'6" people. Doesn't mean it's impossible. But at some point, you might realize, this isn't for me. Yeah, you failed to go to the NBA. That's okay. It's okay. We're going to fail at things in our lives, right? But if you are committed to something and it might take 50 years or 5 years or 5 minutes, as long as you're not quitting, I don't see that as failure ever.
Yeah. I had an acting teacher many years ago. I took acting classes for a couple of years, which I really enjoyed. And he would say, that you do these exercises in the class, and he would say, he'd do a critique and all that kind of stuff, and it was helpful. And he'd say, you come in here every week, you come in and you fail, and you come back the next week and you fail, and you come back the third week and you fail, and you do this over and over again, and you fail your way to success. That's how he used to say it. So, yeah, that wasn't very good, but it doesn't mean anything. It's just one moment. Have you had these people that have lost all their money and everything just come crashing? Let's talk about that, because that's like a huge fear of people. I'm going to lose everything.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing they have is a hope, right? Which is exactly why I get to have those conversations with them. And I ask them, if you've lost everything and we're having this conversation, like, why are you here? And it's because they said that they need help, and they feel like with help, they can get to a better place. And that's all you need. If you have hope, anything's possible. Anything's possible. And in life, and I've learned this because I've lost a lot of money. I've lost relationships. I almost lost my life. There was a lot of loss in my life. I go back to that willingness. If you have a willingness to move forward, trudge, if you will, which is the definition of trudge is intentional steps. If you're willing to trudge forward, you have a chance. It may not come as quickly as you once had it. Maybe it come quicker. Who knows? But I've had those situations, and what I've noticed across the board is that they have that glimmer of hope. Even if people are on the verge of losing things. I've talked to people who were on the verge of losing their marriage. And they've been at that point and I asked them, well, your wife is already out the door. Like, what makes you think this is possible? He's like, I have hope. And that's always the common thing. And I think if you can realize that, have the awareness of how much hope you have, you can recover from anything.
Wise words, my friend. How do people get a hold of you? I'm assuming you do a lot of coaching over the internet, because you can go anywhere in the world and do the same thing. You can have a conversation. How do people get a hold of you?
The best way is going to theprofessionalwingman.com. If you are interested in wanting to work together, you can go to theprofessionalwingman.com/apply, and you will hear from me personally, and we will connect. And then I'm on social media as The Professional Wingman.
What a great title for yourself. Do you have a little drawing or anything that goes with it? Do you have a logo?
There's a fun logo.
Yeah, it's a silhouette of a guy in a business suit, it looks like.
Yeah.
And then with wings, like angel wings or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's since been modified, but like I said before, the biggest thing I feel like, God put me here to help people believe in themselves. And I think sometimes when we're in our lives, whether we're peaking or not peaking, it feels pretty good when we have someone that believes in us and is willing to be by their side as they go through this journey of growth and transformation.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
I am too.
Yeah.
I really am.
Well, have a fantastic evening. Thanks for your time and all your wonderful insights. If you need a wingman, Thomas Edwards is available to be your wingman if you need it. Or if you're a woman, he'll still be your wingman.
Yeah.
Men and women. He helps them all.
Everyone.
Have a great evening.
Appreciate you, Bob. Thanks so much.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. The website is theexplodinghuman.com. There's a YouTube channel where you can listen. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Once again, I want to thank Thomas Edwards. You can find him on social media and online at The Professional Wingman. Have a fantastic day. Thank you.